Hey, good morning. Robert Brittan here, Brittan Vineyards, and welcome to my little chit-chats about the growing year. You know that I love the idea of wine growing, and I do in fact start making this year's vintage at this point, really when we start pruning. But here at Budburst, we're really beginning to see the beginning of the vineyard. Take you along for just a little discussion here of the vineyard, where it's at right now and what it's telling me about the upcoming vintage. So here we are actually well beyond bud break. We have more things to talk about than just at Budburst, but just so you know, official Budburst is when 50% or more of the vineyard little buds are actually at this two bud stage. So here's a pretty good example. This is a very late bud coming out here. But you can see we're starting to get separation on the leaves, and that's really official budburst. The earlier buds, as you can see at this point, are already showing a bit more. So as we can see the fully developed shoot here because we are well beyond bud break. And you can see the little inflorescence. These are flower clusters. Now the thing about grapevine physiology is all of this growing material, and these first few leaves actually are down here now, and the clusters, those were all formed last year during the springtime. And so this little bud, as it emerges, has all of those growing points on it. This is this year's crop. So you can see how vulnerable it is, how we're so concerned about springtime weather because of frost, a hail, an outbreak of mites. All of those kinds of things will kill that bud or knock that bud off or freeze the tissue off, and you will have lost the majority of your crop. So springtime temperature is a big thing, and it's one of the reasons why we think an awful lot about the vulnerability of the vineyard at this point. What does tell the grapevine it's time to actually push that bud that has been dormant all winter long? Excuse me. It really has to do with temperature, mostly soil temperature, but air temperature as well. And the things that affect the temperature of the soil really has an awful lot to do with the aspect. So if the vineyard's on a slope, here we are standing in the Cygnus block. We're actually on the very top of the hill here. So we're getting this part of the vineyard gets fairly good southern exposure, and and gets fairly good west exposure. So this part of the vineyard actually always pushes buds before the lower part of the vineyard, because remember, Cygnus actually drops off to the east. It's what makes this wine one of the things that makes this wine so unique and different from the rest of the property. It is Pinot Noir, and it's on 420A rootstock. All of those things also determine when we're going to see bud burst. So the order of bud burst here on our property is by variety. It's always Chardonnay first, and then Pinot Noir, and then Syrah, and then some of the mixed Rhones. And it is within the framework of the Pinot Noirs, we see some blocks pushing earlier than other blocks, again, because of those aspects and because of the rootstocks. So bud break is spread out, just like harvest is spread out. And in fact, we generally end up picking sort of in the same rate, the same order in which we see bud break. So bud break is really important to note. It also gives us a really good idea of how healthy the vintage is and how much we might be expecting in the way of crop. Now, as the inflorescence is starting to be seen, you can sort of count and get an idea of that. But as you look across the vineyard, you'll see that we have a very nice push, not a lot of really short stunted or not pushing buds. Again, this is a very difficult site to grow grapes on, and it's not uncommon for us to see where we've had winter damage or a very tough growing season the season before, where we start seeing a lot of blind bud and low push. So for this year, this is looking to me like it's going to be a better than generous crop. Okay, so let's take a walk over to the mixed roan block, which, as you know, is right across the alleyway here from Cygnus. We'll take a look at this other pruning technology that we talked about, the spur prune versus cane prune. But more importantly, let's look at bud break in a couple of different varieties grown right here on the same piece of property. So, as I mentioned, the Pinot Noir, which we were just looking at, we were seeing some shoots that are almost 2 or 3 inches. Other parts of the valley right now, just so you know, like in the Dundee Hills or Yamhill Carlton, those shoots are 2 or 3 times that size. Here in McMinnville, as cool as we are and much closer to the coast, we just don't get the growth early on, and in fact during the whole growing season. Here in the mixed roan block, as you can see, the Syrah comes out even later than the Pinot, and it's kind of a fun time to actually look at the different varieties that show up. You can actually identify grapevines as early as this. And I'll just point out a couple of things that I find really interesting. And one of those is as you look across here, these 2 little plants right here, a really good example. As you look across here, you'll see these vines that have a white, sort of a white growing, hairy white growingness to it. And then the actual growing tip itself is quite pink. And it shows up on the total Syrah blocks further over across the vineyard there. Here in another week or so, you'll be able to just see this whole sort of pink cast across the top of the vines. It's really pretty. And you go like, yep, that's definitely Syrah. Here in the mixed blocks, you'll find, though, other plants. So for example, this right here is not, although it looks very similar to Syrah, is not a Syrah plant. Look at how green these leaves are and a different shape of leaf here. This is actually Carignan. That vine, those 2 vines right there are actually Grenache. As you look across here, you'll see the vines that are a little bit further out are the Petite Syrah, and the vines that are really, really green, like this one down over here that have a real yellow green, that's Viognier. And it actually comes out a little bit earlier than the Syrah, but later than Chardonnay. So I think that if you are really curious and really interested in viticulture and this whole concept of wine growing grapes, that you should take the time here during the summer. I do a couple of seminars out here in the vineyard. We'll walk the vineyard and talk about the vintage to date, talk about the aspects of growing grapes here on Brittan Vineyards, where it is such a challenge. So I'd love to have you join us. In the meantime, I did want to point out, you've been hearing this tractor running in the background behind us. We are in the process of doing our under vine cultivation, something we have to do early in the spring. And I'm going to show you here this little interesting piece of equipment. It's called, the manufacturer is a Clemens. It actually is a weed bar that has a hydraulic trip on it that runs under the vines. Let's walk back over here into the Cygnus block and there you go. Good. So Javier, our operator here, is incredibly talented with this machine. What it does is it cleans out the grasses that grow immediately under the vine by literally slicing the roots off and disturbing the soil, so then the tops will dry out. Because this is Oregon and There's always a chance we're going to get a rain tomorrow. It's not going to happen. But in some years, it actually is enough to get the grasses growing back again, and we end up having to do this multiple times. So undervine cultivation, sort of our next process in growing. We have mowed down the cover crop at this point. We'll do the undervine cultivation, and then we'll move into, on those blocks that we're going to take the cover crop out, we'll do it now. And that would be another conversation that we're going to have here in a couple of weeks here in the vineyard. So please join us.